Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, as that will help grow my channel. If you'd like to subscribe, I'd appreciate that as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave those and I will respond. Again, thank you. If you've been following my videos regularly, you'll have seen the sister piece of wood to this. This is another apple crotch. If you want to check it out, apple crotch fail. That one was not successful. This one also has some bark inclusion right here. Again, bark inclusion, a crack, because these were two branches and they moved. So bark ended up growing down in this crack. It's not nearly as bad as the other one. It doesn't extend beyond here. There's nothing down here. So I'm thinking we're going to be okay. It's going to be similar. It's going to be just kind of a shallow bowl. This will be the top here. I'm going to turn this bark away. The bark in the crotch will stay just because of the shape of it. I also, just to make my life a little bit easier, I did take my chainsaw and rounded the corners off just to create a little bit less work for me. So I'm going to go ahead and mount the faceplate and we'll get it on the lathe. Here's the bottom, pretty well rough shaped. I just used my bowl gouge, took about 5 minutes, and just took from the center, worked my way out. It's roughly shaped now. Obviously it's not a finished cut. I'll go back and do that. The last thing I did was put some glue here on this seam to keep this bark. I'm particularly interested in this section and this section here. I want to keep that bark, so I put some glue along that seam. Again, I didn't show the complete turning, but if you watch the apple crotch fail video, you'll see a little more detail around that. Similar up until this point. Hopefully it doesn't end the same way. Beautiful color in it. There's some reds here. Apple's a nice wood. There's no doubt about it. It has a beautiful grain usually. And it's got beautiful colors as well. And being a crotch piece, it just makes it all that much more accentuated, the grain and color. So this is just sanding sealer. So I've already sanded it down to 80 with 80 grit, and put the sanding sealer on it, let it sit, and then I'll come back and finish sanding it up to 400, and then we'll flip it around. It is wet. Again, as I mentioned, wet wood doesn't sand as well as dry wood, but hopefully with a sanding sealer on it, it'll be good. But again, beautiful, beautiful piece of wood. I love the marks in it. And again, there's some red streaks in it. Here you can see, and lots of variations. So beautiful piece of wood. Here I'm going to go ahead and hollow out the inside. I'm using my bowl gouge. You can see it's cutting well. And you also see that I still have my tailstock engaged. I like to keep that engaged as long as possible, especially on this bowl because it had an extremely small tenon on it. So until I get the center mass removed, I'll keep this tailstock engaged. I'm getting pretty good shavings off of that, but I'm also getting some fine sawdust looking ones. So I would say it's time to sharpen the gouge. There, you can see now that I'm getting much larger shavings. I'm not getting that fine sawdust, so. When I hollow out the inside of a bowl, I like to ride the bevel of my gouge down the outside of the bowl, doing a push cut. But then when I get into the center, quite often what I'll do is I'll switch and work from the center out using a pull cut. If you're not familiar with this, I did cover this in some previous videos, the difference between a push cut and a pull cut and how to do each one of those. What you're seeing here now with the flute of the gouge rolled over is still a push cut, and sometimes I can bring that right into the center. Here I'm just undercutting the piece that's underneath the tailstock, which I'm going to remove here shortly. Now I'm back at the rim, just taking another pass from the rim all the way down to the center of the bowl. You do have to be careful when introducing the gouge at the rim. Sometimes it will like to jump because the bevel has nothing to ride until you start down into the bowl. Time for a thickness check. I'm still probably a half an inch there. Yeah, I've got a ways to go yet, but it's cutting nicely, and you can see now that this is going to be left there, so it'll be a nice feature. There is a crack there for sure, and at some point here I'll stop and put some glue on it before I take this centerpiece out. And unlike the last piece, it's not rotted all the way through, although the crack does extend over here. I've already glued that on the back side. I'll put a bit more glue on it, and I think I should be okay. I don't know if you can hear the noise in the background. I happen to be doing the voiceover for this video while sitting on my sailboat riding out Hurricane Lee. And I do hear some cables slapping on the mast. Hopefully that's not too distracting. Here I'm just making a final finish cut. In this case, I am using my bowl gouge still, and I'm trying to take a single pass from the outside right to the center, and the bowl gouge will give me a pretty smooth cut. There, that is as thin, I think, as I want to go. Yes, I think it is. So right there, you can see how thin I am. That's as thin as I want to go. Still maintaining the bark, so that's looking good. I've mentioned this before in my previous videos, but this is a good demonstration of that. When I'm out near the rim, I can have the flute of my gouge pointing in an upward direction, but as I come across the bottom, what I want to do is roll that gouge over so that the flute is almost parallel to the floor. This one is probably pointing a little more up than what I would like, but it is cutting well, so sometimes you can just go with it. But generally speaking, you'd want to roll that over. Now I'm doing a pull cut, which I mentioned before, starting at the middle and moving the gouge out towards the edge of the bowl. Again, the flute would be rolled over. There we go. That is bowl shaped. I can just now take my negative rate scraper, just even up the inside a little bit. A little bit, still more to come out of the bottom. Remove that nub, and this bowl will be pretty well done. Hollowing out the inside, I was probably 15 minutes. Here I'm just working at removing that center nib that was left over when I broke the piece off that was attached to the tailstock, and then I'm also thinning out the bottom, which is still a little bit thick. there we go, that's it. Smooth that up, and this one will be done. I'm pretty pleased with it. I will put some glue on these cracks though. Just make sure everything stays together. Negative rake scraper, sanding, and this one is done. So I've gone over that with the scraper. I actually found the scraper worked a bit better than the negative rake. And I've also sanded it. It's just with 80 grit at this point. There's still a couple fine lines there. Right there I can see one. So I got to work on that. May require a bit of spot sanding, but it's in good shape. I'm going to take it off the lathe so I can set it up so that I can get some glue down in this crack. When it's vertical like this, the glue just runs down. So I want to get it horizontal so I can get some glue down in that crack. But it's looking good. So I'd be interested in your opinion on this. This bowl, it was wet and it is apple. Now some woods will move more than others. If you watch my video on yellow birch will move, doesn't tend to crack. Apple doesn't move, but it cracks, and usually cracks very bad. And I did. I got a crack that ran from here all the way out to the rim. I've repaired it with CA glue, just CA glue, no filler. Let me know what you think. I think once I put some finish on it, it'll darken up, which will make it less obvious. But it also runs along with the crotch, which would be to be expected because that would be an area of high stress. So I don't think it looks bad. I think it looks semi-natural. Here it is on the outside. Again, it doesn't look bad. I'm going to leave it at this point. It's not going to be fancy firewood. I think it turned out well. I'll just finish sanding it and put a finish on it. Here I'm just applying my finish to the bowl. I'm going to use tung oil for a couple reasons. One, I'm not sure what the use of this bowl will be. It may be used with some food, so I'm going to use tung oil. Tung oil is also a good option, especially when I've got bark, live edge, because I can't use a friction polish on the bowl itself. Now I am doing this tung oil on the lathe. I know I had a previous video and I talked about doing it off lathe. You can. One of the advantages of doing it off the lathe is you're not tying up any face plates or chucks at that point. But in this case, it wasn't going to take me long and I didn't have anything else to go on the lathe. So I just applied the tung oil while on the lathe. You always have an option when finishing the bottom of the bowl. In this case, I've got a tenon. I could have left that tenon on, but to me it looked a little odd. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it and then clean up the bottom a little bit more. Apologize, I'm in the camera here for a second. But what I'm doing here is, you saw that I had a centerpiece in the lathe. I put a non-slip cloth over it. Then I bring the tailstock up to the very center of the bowl. I actually marked that tenon with my tailstock so that I could use it for realigning, so I could get close. And here you can see I'm just testing to make sure that everything is turning and it's not out of round. We're good here, so we can start removing that tenon. I know for some people, especially for new turners, this may seem like a precarious way to remove that tenon. It's actually not. It's fairly safe. You've got the tailstock pushing hard up against that centerpiece. So really there's not much opportunity for this to slip as long as you stop before you remove all the tenon and therefore come away from the tailstock. I know I mentioned this in a previous video, but with my past lathe, I couldn't do this because my tailstock and the center of my lathe were off a little bit. This one is not. It's very precise, so I can apply a nice steady pressure with my tailstock which will allow me to clean up this tenon quite easily. Well, I'm excited to have made it to this point in the video. As you can see, this bowl was a success, unlike the previous one. If you've been watching my videos, the apple crotch fail. This was the sister piece, so it's identical, but again, this one was successful. What made this one a success while the previous one failed? This one did not have the same degree of rot. Matter of fact, there wasn't any rot in this piece at all. It did have a crack, which you can see here. We'll talk about that a bit later. But overall, it held together and I think turned into a very beautiful bowl. About 8 inches in diameter and about 2.5 inches tall. I was very pleased that I could incorporate the V-notch here and the live edge, as you can see here in the inside of the crotch. Here you can see the crack that I repaired from 2 angles. First of all, looking at it sideways, and here looking at it overhead. I should mention that this crack has been repaired with CA glue, and it will not come apart. It is stronger than the rest of the wood, but I think it does give the overall bowl some character. I like to engrave on the bottom of my bowl my logo, along with the year that the bowl was made, as well as the species. Here you can see the crack is maybe even a little more pronounced, so it does run right through my logo, but again, I think it just adds character. This bowl was destined for the gentleman who gave me the wood. Thank you, Daryl. But you may have to arm wrestle my wife for it because she's in love with the bowl right now. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you like this kind of bowl or not, and if you think I should have done anything differently.